Greetings and thanks for joining us again. My name is Carlos Salinas. I'm the Regional Director of the U.S. Soybean Export Council in the Americas, and a pleasure to share another biweekly update with you. This presentation is designed for key customers like you and for USEC's internal purposes. Please continue to send us your feedback so we can improve this presentation. Before we get started, and as we always do, we like to recognize USEC's wide and diverse membership. Within that membership, we have soybean exporters, soybean processors, seed companies, equipment manufacturers, railroads, surveyors, brokers, resellers, among many other important stakeholders and funding sources. And we cannot ignore the support and the contribution that we receive from the U.S. Soybean farmer. Without that support, this presentation would not be possible. I hope you find this presentation of value. The agenda today is going to be brief. We'll talk about the Brazilian soybean basis, crush margins, and U.S. weather. So we'll try to keep it very light for you. So let's talk about the Brazilian soybean basis. But before we do that, I would like to share with you some of the crop production numbers that our friends from Oil World have put together for the South American crop for 2022-23. And as you can see, in the Southern Hemisphere for 2022-23, we have a crop close of 194 million metric tons. Certainly an improvement to the 184 million metric tons that we had last year between Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay. Bolivia should have been added, but that's all right. That being said, many believe that this is a record crop that we had in South America, and that's not the case. We don't have a record crop in South America. We have to be objective about it. If you look at 2020-2021, we had a crop of 201 million metric tons. And if you look at 2019-2020, we had a crop of 195.6 million metric tons, certainly above the 194 million metric tons that we have right now. And I think the difference is that we've seen certainly a record crop in Brazil, 155 million metric tons. That is huge. There's no doubt about it. And as you well know, Brazil is the largest soybean exporter out of this region, because Argentina is mainly a soybean meal and soybean oil exporter. But the crop reduction that we've seen in Argentina has been massive, right? We went from 42 million metric tons to 22 million metric tons, let's say, call it 20 million metric ton loss, almost half of their crop. And we know that Argentina in 2019 and 2020 produced 49 million metric tons. So certainly a shift in the production numbers from one origin to the other. But nonetheless, South America did not have a record crop this year compared to what many may want to believe. I think what's interesting, though, is that Brazil did have a record crop, and Brazil is having a record export program of 94 million metric tons, which is massive in scale. Nonetheless, I remember when Brazilian production was only 55 million metric tons. So, and now their exports are 94 million metric tons, a significant increase. And that brought some consequences that I think as harvest began, obviously that put some pressure on some of the soybean bases. When we take a look at the stocks to use ratio, as Oil World outlines this, we've seen an improvement in 2022-23 in a global scale. That is, the global stocks to use ratio, as Oil World measures it, is at 24.5% compared to 23.7%, but yet below the 27.3% that we had in 2020, 21, and 2019, 2020. So we still depend on the U.S. crop to come in steady with good volumes to try to build those reserves back up. So let's take a look. Certainly this large Brazilian crop put a lot of pressure on basis, with limitations on elevator capacity, limitation on logistics, and trying to find demand in the worldplace as these beans were coming out, and there was no space in the interior to hold them. And that led to many things, including building a large carry in the market, giving the market the incentive to store beans as much as possible. So, but let's take a look what has happened recently from April 20th through all the way through May 5th, according to our friends at Commodities, which is one of our brokers in South America. And we've seen the basis. We've seen the basis in June, in April 20th, improve about 55 cents a bushel, or $20 a metric ton, when we compare it to the May 5th basis. May 5th basis is 110 on the bid side and 90 under on the offer side. And we see on the offer side, that basis has improved about 65 cents a bushel, or $24 a metric ton. So yeah, we saw a tremendous dip on the basis, but we're seeing a significant recovery at the same time. And that's probably for many reasons. One of the reasons I would say is beans have found their space. Most of them have already been harvested. So they are in position. They're getting put away. But also look at the market structure, at least on the FOB side. Look at the June bids and look at the July bids, right? So if you have the capacity to be able to store some of those soybeans and ship them in July instead of June, you get rewarded quite a bit, right? And I think the industry has that incentive. And that's only on the FOB side. Now, I can assure you that if you go to the interior, I can assure you that the cost of transportation in June of those soybeans from the interior of Brazil to the port is likely a lot higher than it would be in July. And I would imagine as you get to August, that transportation will be much cheaper as well. So the industry has an incentive to hold that physical inventory, carry it, and ship it on a later window. Reason why we've seen that significant break on that soybean basis kind of recover. The gut slot window is over us, and now we're seeing a different tune to the South American basis, which is going to be very interesting to watch over the next few days. Now, we also know that Brazilian farmer selling is actually low, and we've seen certainly better prices for soybeans for the Brazilian farmers earlier this year. This chart right here takes basically the CME and converts it to soybeans in Brazilian reais. This is actually, when we look at this 72, this is 72 reais per bushel. I took the May contract in the CME and multiplied it times the local currency. So it gives us an idea of the price of Chicago in local currency. It's not a full picture because it doesn't account for the basis, right? So it's a bit misleading in that sense, but it does give you a good idea what the combination of Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the combination of foreign exchange have done to the price of beans locally. And we know that Brazilian farmers have seen better days. So if the beans have been put away and they're stored right now, and the farmer has the capacity to wait at this price level, I don't think it's not as palatable as it was before, and they would rather wait for a better situation. So I think that's what we have. Now, the other interesting chart that I'd like to share with you is the July versus November soybean spread. That is, when you look at the CME and you take a look at July soybeans, and you look at the difference between July soybeans and November soybeans. Now, when July soybeans are more expensive than November soybeans, we call this a inverse. Many call it a contango, some call it a backwardation, but it's basically an expression that the market is trying to ration through price, is trying to ration demand for those soybeans given the limited supply. And what I want to share with you is what's really circled over here. We know that inverse hit $1.74, certainly in April, and then with the cheaper South American basis and the pressure that we saw on those cash values, and even some of those soybeans hitting the U.S. market, we saw quite a significant erosion of that inverse, almost hitting close to $1.40, or call it $1.42, 43 a bushel. But then we noticed this quick recovery, right? This quick recovery, which is very well lined up with the South American basis. So I'm not going to tell you which direction to go. I just think it's this is one of the signals that I think a lot of buyers around the world should be watching for soybeans and soybean meal, because it may be telling you that the opportunity may be passing us very soon. And it may be a very good window to at least lock in part of your logistics and part of your needs in the short term, right? Again, if we take a look at this inverse, from a historical perspective, we know that this is one of the steeper inversions that we've seen globally. So we are still not out of the woods on a very tight soybean scenario, regardless of what the Brazilian crop is, because we've seen South America have bigger crops overall, right? And this is quite a unique situation where Brazil has a significant crop, but Argentina has a very low crop. Now, this last couple of weeks, we've had, I think, two major publicly traded companies and crushers, members of USIC, show their quarterly earnings. I think these crushers navigated the turbulent waters extremely well, showing excellent returns, and really congratulations to them for a job well done. But one of the slides shared by ADM, which I like to share here with you, which I always find interesting, is the evolution of crush margins, right? And we see what the spot crush margin structure has done in the U.S. From Q4 all the way to Q1. And remember, in Q4, we were $90 to $100 a metric ton. Now the spot crush margins are $55 to $65 a metric ton. So you can say that the crusher is charging less to the oil refiner, is charging less to the meal buyer to convert those soybeans into meal and oil. If you're a buyer, that's not a bad thing. However, you also have to keep in mind that these are spot crush margins. It is very likely that the crushers have locked in those margins way ahead of time at very different windows. I'm not going to say if higher and lower, but you can imagine. So the spot crush margins, while it is interesting to monitor, right, it may not necessarily mean much. I think what's more important is what those deferred crush margins are doing. When you take a look at December, you take a look at March of next year, and I think you can see that those deferred crush margins are a lot closer to that $90 to $100 a metric ton than that 50, 65. And I think in the comments of those quarterly earnings by both Bunge and ADM, they talk about the South American crop, and they highlight, how this may play out in the future, because today Argentina may have soybeans. While they don't have that many, they have a few soybeans to commercialize. That may give some short-term liquidity, but ultimately Argentina will run out of that supply, and how the market reacts to that, it's going to be interesting. And as a soybean meal buyer, I think you have to be aware and not be misled by this short-term scenario, right? And make sure you take a more of a longer-term approach to your purchasing and your logistical commitments. Let's talk briefly about U.S. weather, and I don't want to spend too much time here. I think weather conditions today are no better or worse than they were 2 weeks ago. 20% of the soybean production area is experiencing some type of drought. I think the areas of concern remain the same: Nebraska, Iowa, mainly, maybe some parts of South Dakota. I think the part that does concern me a bit is on the seasonal drought outlook. I'm glad to see that some parts of Nebraska are seeing potential improvement, but this yellow area, which means drought development likely, covers northern Missouri and parts of Iowa. I would be a bit concerned of this development. Hopefully won't materialize, but as you can imagine, these are key production areas, and we certainly hope they improve. On a short-term perspective, from a temperature outlook, not much we can say really, and it's really early. We're going to have a bit warmer weather in the next 6 to 10 days. Most of the southern part of the U.S. is going to experience, central and southern part is going to experience above normal precip, good thing to have. And the rest of the country will be relatively normal. So no major flags from that side. I hope the information shared here was of value. I want to take this opportunity to wish all the mothers that are listening a very happy Mother's Day. It will be Mother's Day next Sunday, and it'll be Mother's Day during the midweek in many of Latin American countries as well. So wishing you all the best. Thanks for sticking and listening to me, and I look forward to talking to you in a couple of weeks. Take care. Bye.